This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name is Eben Jansen. The show is very much live and we're broadcasting from, our main newsroom today here in Auckland Park in Johannesburg. This is the epicenter where everything really happens for SABC News. We collate from all our bureaus around the country and then we syndicate it here from the main news hub right here in Johannesburg. Now, the show is also on YouTube right now. We're streaming live there. You can watch it also on demand a little bit later if you're in the office right now or you've missed it. Anyhow, today we'll be live outside the North Gauteng High Court shortly with Griselda Lewis, who'll give us a little update as we go into day 2 of sentencing procedures in the Oscar Pistorius trial. Also, we'll speak to a Worksman's attorney straight after that to give us a little bit of insight as to how the first day of the trial of sentencing procedure went for Oscar Pistorius. We'll also deal with human trafficking when we speak to the South African police about this scourge that's on the increase here inside the borders of South Africa. All of that a little bit later, but first, let's go back to Studio 9 where Katrine Milan is standing by with the news of the day.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan and let's take a look at the morning's headlines. The cross-examination of Oscar Pistorius' manager, Petrus van Zyl, in the pre-sentencing hearing is set to continue in the North Gauteng High Court this morning. The defence is expected to wrap up its arguments and mitigation later today. Pistorius shot and killed model girlfriend Riva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day last year. He has been convicted of culpable homicide. Prosecutor Gerrie Nel is expected to ask today that Pistorius spend at least some time behind bars.
Just 3 years, 276C is shockingly inappropriate for what happened in this matter. Shockingly inappropriate. Have you had any thought of the family of the deceased?
The trial of Shireen Ravani will continue in the Western Cape High Court this morning. A former employee of the dating website Gaydar, Eben Jansen, gave evidence of Ravani's activity on the website before and after his wife Annie's murder. The state is expected to call its 4th witness today. The government has denied reports that strained relations between South Africa and Nigeria are causing delays in the repatriating the bodies of South Africans who died in the Lagos church collapse. 84 South Africans were among the 115 people who were killed when the guest house at televangelist pastor T.D. Joshua's church collapsed a month ago. Government says it's following all necessary processes to make sure that the remains of the people are brought home. A probe by Nigerian authorities is underway to find out what caused the building to collapse. Mozambique's ruling Frelimo party and its presidential candidate look likely to win elections this week despite voters' dissatisfaction with inequality. Former liberation movement Frelimo, which has dominated voting in the ex-Portuguese colony since its 1975 independence, is widely expected to win the country's 5th presidential ballot. More than 10 million voters will tomorrow also select a new 250-seat parliament and members of 10 provincial assemblies. Ebola has been ruled out for 5 people with flu symptoms who were evacuated from a passenger jet in Boston in the US yesterday. The flight was quarantined for about 2 hours on arrival from Dubai. It was at least the 3rd Ebola scare on a commercial flight within the United States in just days. Meanwhile, health workers reported for duty at Liberia's hospital yesterday, largely defying calls for a strike for more pay. Healthcare workers in West Africa are on the front line of the outbreak, which has killed more than 4,000 people this year. Remember, all these top stories and more are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. I'm back here in the working studio, Studio 9. A very good morning to you if you've just joined us once again. Now, it's the second day of sentencing procedures of Paralympian Oscar Pistorius on a charge of culpable homicide. State prosecutor Gerrie Nel will continue to cross-examine Pistorius' manager, Petrus van Zyl. He told the High Court in Pretoria about Pistorius' involvement with various charities and that the athlete was planning to retire in 2017. He said Pistorius lost all his endorsements after the shooting. Now, for the latest, let's cross to our reporter, Griselda Lewis, who as always is outside the North Gauteng High Court. Good morning to you, Griselda. How are you today?
very good morning to you, Eben. Very well, thank you.
Griselda, before we start on the merits of what went on inside the courtroom, I read this morning that security's been beefed up quite a bit outside at the entrance and around the High Court. Do you have any idea why that is? Has there been a threat maybe against Oscar Pistorius?
Well, what we're hearing at this stage, police are not willing to confirm nor deny why security has been beefed up here at the North Gauteng High Court. But certainly this morning we saw some sniffer dogs and some scanners that have been put just at the entrance of the courtroom. But there's a lot of speculation at this stage, and no one is willing to confirm whether Oscar Pistorius is indeed receiving threats. So we don't have any assistance from the police at this stage about why security has been beefed up. Yep.
And just tell us then, what's the expectation today inside of the court?
Well, the news that I've just heard right now is that one of the witnesses that the state plans to call in this matter is the mother of Oscar Pistorius' ex-girlfriend, Samantha Taylor. You would recall that Samantha Taylor was one of the witnesses in this matter and basically painted a picture of Oscar Pistorius as somebody who was violent, who did not handle a gun very well. So it's just been confirmed to SABC News that Samantha Taylor's mother will take the stand for the state. It's supposed that she will be one of the first witnesses that the state plans to call. You would know that the defense will call its last witness this morning, a probation officer, who will basically give details about an implementation plan should this court allow for Oscar Pistorius to serve his sentence under house arrest.
Oscar was very much painted yesterday as a very charitable and broken young man. Just give us your views or the things that stood out for you after yesterday's procedure.
Well, certainly what it looks like that the defense is trying to do in this matter at this stage, Eben, is that they're really trying to undo some of the reputational damage that may have been done to Oscar Pistorius' character throughout this trial, and that we've heard that, Oscar Pistorius is trigger happy, that Oscar Pistorius does not care about anybody other than himself. So the defense is really trying to show Judge Thokozile Masipa at this stage that Oscar Pistorius, has suffered just as much as anybody else. You must remember, they've always maintained that he thought that there was somebody else behind that door on that Valentine's Day morning. So basically, he's a psychiatrist, but the lady who had basically, the therapist in this matter, had actually said that when she'd seen Oscar Pistorius several times, Oscar Pistorius would, through the many sessions, not be able to go through those sessions because he was so emotional. He showed remorse, he was sorry for what he did, and basically trying to paint a picture of someone who was remorseful for what happened. He's remorseful for shooting and killing Reeves Steenkamp. So certainly there has been quite a lot of reaction on social networking sites and also here on the streets of Pretoria, people that we have spoken to. Gerrie Nel we saw yesterday trying to rubbish those claims by basically saying that the people who have actually lost here are the Steenkamp family. You would recall also in the cross-examination of Joel Maringa, who is the correctional services official, when Joel Maringa had basically said that Oscar Pistorius can be rehabilitated outside of the prison walls. We saw, Gerrie Nel really becoming very irritated by insinuating that the Steenkamps were the only ones who truly lost in this matter because their daughter is no more. You would recall, he asked Joel Maringa, he said, did you take into account the feelings of the Steenkamp family before making these recommendations? So certainly we're in for another showdown inside the court today as the cross-examination of Oscar Pistorius' longtime agent, Piet van Zyl, gets underway.
Finally, Griselda, I wanted to ask you, talk about trauma and the loss that the Steenkamp family have suffered. Is there any chance of the Steenkamp family or members of the Steenkamp family taking to the stand for the prosecution?
What I can certainly tell you, Eben, is that the Steenkamps are definitely not going to take the stand. What we understand is that there's going to be a victim impact report which will be read out in court, which will detail the psychological and also financial impact that this has had on the Steenkamps and their friends. But also for the state, where I think the state is coming in on this matter with the testimony, which I can confirm that Samantha Taylor's mother will take the stand. What is likely to happen in this matter, you would remember that Samantha Taylor did date Oscar Pistorius, so she might even give an account of how her daughter was treated by Oscar Pistorius, what the relationship between Samantha Taylor and Oscar Pistorius was like. This now, of course, Samantha Taylor's mother giving those details. So, of course, it would be very difficult for the Steenkamps. It was highly unlikely for them to take the stand. But, of course, if they bring in one of the friends, one of the family members, or even one of the ex-girlfriend's mothers, which is what will happen in this case, certainly it will be a last-ditch effort to show Judge Thokozile Masipa to undo basically what those defense witnesses said yesterday when they painted a rosy picture of Oscar Pistorius' reputation. Today, that's expected to be undone by Girinel, to say that there is a history of violent behavior here by Oscar Pistorius, even though he is a first-time offender. As Joel Maringa had pointed out, you would remember there were incidents such as the nightclub brawl, which they would want to highlight as well, to say that Oscar Pistorius, his reputation, he does not know how to conduct himself in a proper manner. So certainly the direction which the state is going to take this morning.
Yes, and that will point to lots of other scenarios around remorse and the like. But thank you, Griselda Lewis, giving us a little update. Should be an absolutely another riveting day inside the North Gauteng High Court. You can also follow Griselda on Twitter, of course. She always puts up-to-the-minute reports as to what's happening inside the court, the mood and so forth. It should be a riveting and very interesting day. Well, now we're going to go to our Cape Town studio to unpack the last 24 hours. We're joined by Bernard Hartz, a legal expert from Worksman's Attorneys. A very good morning to you, Bernard. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben. Nice to be with you again.
Far away, Bernard. Normally you're in Johannesburg with us. Are you on holiday?
Unfortunately not, but I am enjoying the beautiful mountain and the harbour in the distance, as you can see.
You can't eat the mountain and you can't drink the seawater, Bernard. But let's get down to the business of today. Day one done and dusted. What did you make of proceedings yesterday in the North Gauteng High Court?
Eben, you'll recall right from the beginning I've said that when it comes down to sentencing, it must be the role of the defence to adduce evidence in mitigation of sentence. They obviously want to ensure that Oscar gets as minimum or as lenient a sentence as possible, bearing in mind that the judge has convicted him of culpable homicide. The judge is really at large to impose whatever sentence she deems appropriate after hearing the expert testimony or the testimony of the witnesses who are adduced. So we heard yesterday, obviously, argument in mitigation, and we're going to hear from the state when the state gets their chance, argument in aggravation of sentence. Unfortunately, it does not bode well when witnesses are reduced in mitigation of sentence, when clearly the witness hasn't had regard to the actual facts in the case. And I referred to the blatant error in shots were fired into the floor instead of shots being fired through the door.
Absolutely. And what do you think then the rationale behind that, Barry Rue not leading the plea in mitigation?
Well, obviously, unfortunately one can prepare as best as possible, but during testimony, things come out, and obviously we saw how Gerrie Nel responded to statements which really illustrated that the job of the person who's testifying, whether it was the psychiatrist or the social worker or the agent, their role is to try and assist the defense in showing that Oscar has suffered enough and that rather than impose a harsh sentence, jail time, He's suffered enough. Let him get the minimum. We obviously don't see the flip side of the coin, where we see the outrage or the distraught nature of the feelings experienced by the Steenkamp family, having regard to what's being said in court at the moment.
Yes, the Steenkamp families are the real victims in this case. It's clear for all to see. But yesterday, Oscar was portrayed as a real victim in this case, a man that's lost so much. How did you read that, and did you buy it?
Well, I think the reality is, I don't think anybody can underestimate how much he has suffered, whether it is emotional, psychological, financial. He has suffered and will continue to suffer. Is that enough to excuse the fact that Reeva Steenkamp is dead, that it is as a result of his actions, whether or not the conviction remains as is, or whether an appeal court may in due course have its say? I think we can't move away from the fact that he has suffered, is suffering, but is that enough? That's the real question in law.
In law, there's also a scenario called recklessness in this case. There talks of house arrest and pleas for house arrest being made yesterday. The media widely reporting about house arrest, but if you look at the amount of recklessness that went into the scenario that played out with Oscar Pistorius, there's very little chance of him getting only house arrest. Would that be accurate, Bernard?
Eben, as I say, we must recognize that the judge is really at large to impose whatever sentence she deems is appropriate in the circumstances. From my personal point of view, and I go back to what I said earlier, I personally do believe that there's been an error in law in the conviction, and I personally don't believe that it would be appropriate for there simply to be a house arrest a sentence in this regard.
An error in law. Do you think that there'll be an appeal?
In my personal view, I think that the state may very well seriously consider taking it on appeal. I remain of the view that there was an error in law. But as I said previously, I'm an armchair critic, and I haven't had the benefit of sitting in court and listening to all of the evidence and considering it in the light of all of that.
Bernard Hotz, thank you. An armchair critic now with a beautiful view, at least. Thank you very much for joining us. Bernard Hotz, legal expert from Worksman's Attorneys, joins us live from Cape Town today. Bernard is always in the studio here in Johannesburg with us. He's been for the entire Oscar Pistorius and other trials. Interesting that he should be in Cape Town right now. Let's take a look at what your views are after day one of the Oscar Pistorius trial. Sandy Doa says, in a nutshell, defense are asking judge to sentence OP to running and signing autographs while living in a mansion. Ooh. Regan John Murphy says, Oscar Pistorius is guilty of cold-blooded, premeditated murder. He conveniently lost his iPhone for 12 days and destroyed all the CCTV footage. Gunyula Josh confused. How can a man shoot someone 4 times and claim it was not intentional? Oscar, justice is needed in Mzansi. Scorpio 16 says, sounds like Oscar's the victim now. 3 years community service for gunning down your mate in cold blood would be a travesty of justice. Yes, a lot of people share that view. Tamsanga Maikize says, Oscar is a broken man, while Reeva is a broken dead woman. The irony of the dead, they can't speak for themselves. Tamsanga, that unfortunately is at the heart of this case. And it's a discussion point that the nation and the world has had for more than a year now. Let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe today. In Europe, the Times is reporting that the Ebola crisis could be on the same scale as the AIDS epidemic. This is what Britain's Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt said after he announced that temperature checks on passengers from West Africa will begin at United Kingdom airports today. Then we go to the South China Morning Post, is looking at violent confrontations by taxi drivers in Admiralty. The drivers say the civil disobedience movement, which is in its third week there, has hampered business. And we come back to the African continent. In Nigeria, you will see that the Cameroonian president, Paul Biya, has warned that his government would go after the Islamist group Boko Haram until it is totally wiped out. Now, we go into a break on a lighter note. A Celtics fan in the US was recently caught on a jumbotron while really getting into the spirit of the game. Jeremy Fry was just sitting in his seat, minding his own business, when his favorite song, Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer, started to play. He couldn't contain his enthusiasm and got up and began to dance in the aisles. It seems like his fellow fans loved his spontaneous routine. Look at how Jeremy made everyone around him smile, including us here at Newsroom. Only in America, I tell you. Wonderful routine there by Jeremy Fry, who claims that he was 100% sober when he did that. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back with more after a short little break.
Marcus is warning that the industrial action will weigh on the current account. Now, it reflects the degree to which South Africa is importing more than it exports.
More discriminatory investors will avoid placing money in SA bonds and equities and go elsewhere. Given the fragility of the country's twin deficits,
The strike has already impacted negatively on economic growth, but it hasn't had a big impact on export data just yet.
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're still in Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, human trafficking, which is the unlawful movement of people, typically for the purposes of forced marriage, labor or sexual exploitation, is the second largest profit-making crime in the world. Most trafficking victims are girls aged between 5 and 15 years, and there are, around 1.2 million believed to be trafficked each year worldwide, and half of those are children. Human trafficking has become even bigger than before, and it is less visible now. Now, to talk to us about the scenario here in South Africa and the rest of the continent, national spokesperson for the Hawks, Captain Paul Ramaloko. Good morning, Captain. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you very much.
Let's start with the legal framework here in South Africa. Where are we? Is the anti-human trafficking law in effect 100%?
No, currently we are using the Sexual Offence Act. You will understand that the Human Trafficking Act is not yet promulgated, meaning that we won't charge anyone on that legislation. But the Sexual Offence Act make a provision for us to charge traffickers, say for the purpose of, exploitation of whatever sort listed. So we are currently using the Sexual Offence Act, and it's as effective.
The worrying thing that we see in the media now or reported is that within our borders, there's a lot of trafficking happening. We always think that it's an external, internal scenario, or people being shipped or trafficked around the world. But in South Africa, between provinces, people are being trafficked, and that's on the rise. Is that right?
Yeah, indeed. You'll understand that we'll have Cape Town and Gauteng as the hotspot for trafficking. These young girls or young boys will be taken from the rural area, promised better jobs at the end of the day, especially women, as you have indicated in the intro. They will be promised good jobs here in Gauteng or in Cape Town. And when they arrive here, they are told to be on a wait. Obviously, there are people who do not have money. Then they will be told that accommodation will be carried by the trafficker. At the end of the day, they will have to pay back the money once they get the job. At the end of the day, they are given drugs. The next morning, they find themselves, sexually exploited.
Yeah, that's very worrying. What about other practices here in South Africa that we see? Things like traditional, the ukutwala. Does that form part of the scenarios that plays out here in South Africa? Is that used as a front? If so, how does it work?
Yeah, it does, because you'll understand that young girls are being sold, by maybe their parents or their relatives. Most of those that are being sold, you find that they've lost their parents, and they are being sold to older men for none other than, sexual exploitation. We are saying that is a criminal offense, and as law enforcement officers, we cannot allow it to go that way. And you will find your provinces, you can talk about Limpopo, you can talk about Mpumalanga and the Northwest. The type of trafficking happening there is where young boys are being, exploited in the form of labor, where they are being made to work in the farms for long hours. At the end of the day, they are not paid. They're just given a piece of bread and a Coca-Cola, and they're being sent away. So we are saying things shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, that's very, very difficult. We're very much a sporting nation also here in South Africa. How does big sporting events tie into the human trafficking scenario? Does it increase human trafficking, especially here in South Africa?
Yeah, there are many factors which, contribute to trafficking, because you'll understand that when you have your major events in the country, people will believe traffickers when they are being told that, no, there are, good things for you in this type of a country where there is an event. You can talk about our 2010 World Cup. If people were to be told from, say, our neighboring countries that there are good prospects for them here, they would happily come here, or to find that at the end of the day, they're being exploited.
We see now on the African continent, we're battling in West Africa with Ebola virus that's spreading like wildfire. It's a real threat to everybody. Do you expect people to be told in those kinds of countries by human traffickers that there's a better future for them in South Africa and they could get them here? And how do you guys deal with that kind of threat?
Yeah, you'll understand that with the spread of technology this nowadays, traffickers, it's easy for them to lure their victims on through the use of social networks. And at the end of the day, by the time as law enforcement officer try to rescue the person, you find that it's late. But we are saying communication means a lot at the present moment, and especially the use of internet. The traffickers are using those platforms to, get their victims, and they believe that, there are good things for them when they are being, interacted with on those platforms.
It's one of the largest, or the second largest, profit-making crime on the planet. Why does it continue to be underreported?
Because you'll understand that it is committed between people who, one way or the other, know each other.
Yes.
It is seldom that a stranger can just recruit a person. It does happen, but it's not, alarming. But when a person is known to the other, and there is an element of trust in between, and at the end of the day, the victims are not even well cooperating with us when we are trying to assist them, so that we can hold the trafficker accountable. They keep on believing that good things are on the way for them.
Finally, Captain, policy options, legal framework. Should this be considered, or should this be addressed when we deal with human trafficking, and how do you want that to be addressed?
No, we are saying that the new Trafficking Act, it is more focused on the victim, and the Sexual Offence Act is also there to focus mostly on the offender. So we are saying we do have a good legislative framework to cap this, but we are saying victims should also cooperate with law enforcement officers so that at the end of the day, we are able to bring these culprits to book.
Well, Captain Paul Ramaloko, National Spokesperson of the Hawks, joining us today, shedding light on this very worrying crime here in South Africa and the rest of the world. Thank you once again, Captain, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, let's now go on to our social pages. What are you talking about? I'm sure it must be something like Srindavani or Oscar, something like it. Srindavani, yes. Tam Sang says, if Devani is bisexual, why the fuss? All human beings has the ability to commit crimes, even the most morally inclined. That's Tommy's view there. Justice for Annie Ndorcha says, Devani first insisted he was straight, then forced to admit to being bisexual. Now today, he's been proven in court to be gay, as originally alleged. Yes, they say that his story is changing, much like his story is changing. Ernest Mama Hobo says, Jub Jub, Oscar, Devani, South African courtrooms are under huge spotlight. Yes, it's always been the case. Justice must be seen to be done. Mfundo Sitole says, Oscar should get at least 15 years minimum. Devani should get life. That's the views of Mfundo. Dafisto says, I'm lost. What does Devani being gay or bisexual have to do with him ordering a hit on his wife? Dafisto, motive, my friend. That's what it's all about. This case rests on motive. What was his motive to have his wife killed? If he is proven to be gay and was forced to marry this woman by his family, that leads you to motive. That's at the heart of this case. Let's take a look at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page now. We love your interactions there. Give us your comments. I'll read some of those out if it's good enough. Several SABC radio stations have been nominated for the prestigious Choral Music Achievement Awards for this year. The national ceremony will be staged in Durban on November the 1st. Then government has denied reports that strained relations between South Africa and Nigeria are causing delays in repatriating the bodies of South Africans who died in the Lagos church collapse. And then also you'll find all the latest, of course, on the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. Day 2 of sentencing procedures are underway right now. Priscilla Lewis will give you another update at the top of the next hour. You can find all of these stories and a whole lot more on that page that you see right there. That is the Newsroom Facebook page. Go there and like it, and we'll keep you updated as to how things go throughout the news day, every day. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. We'll be back after a short little break.
BMW Connected Drive, you triggered an emergency call. What happened? Mr. Miller? I can see your position in the system. Should we send help to your location?
No, the problem's already riding away.
Introducing Intelligent Emergency Call from BMW Connected Drive.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. Time is just gone 9:35 a.m. Central African time here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Time for us to go to the North Gauteng High Court. Judge Masipa, as you can see behind me, is standing by for us as we go ahead with Day 2, sentencing procedures in the sensational Oscar Pistorius trial.
Of funds for various charities globally. Now, if one looks at the charities, and let's just look, UNICEF. UNICEF is a conglomerate of sportsmen and celebrities that become involved in charitable events.
That is correct.
It's not only Mr. Pistorius.
No, not indeed.
In fact, sportsmen would like to be part of UNICEF.
It is indeed an honor when UNICEF actually approaches sportsmen.
So if they approach you, you cannot say no. It will not be clever to say no.
Indeed not clever.
And Mr. Pistorius was approached by UNICEF and he became involved, like any other sportsman would do.
That is correct.
Good. The same with the Laura Sports Awards and organization.
That is indeed correct.
If you approach and you're a sportsman, it will not be clever not to be involved.
It's definitely not clever to be involved, but I think it goes far more than just being clever. It also allows the sportsman the opportunity to really contribute.
I know what you want to say, but if you just follow on the questions, then we get by quicker. Please, Mr. Van Zyl. Now, again, Laura Sports approached Mr. Pistorius to become involved. He said yes, he became involved. Am I right?
That's correct, my lady.
Good. We know that Oakley is Mr. Pistorius is one of his big sponsors.
That is correct indeed.
Being a sponsor, you are obligated to do things for your sponsors. Am I right?
That is also indeed correct. That
by getting involved in charitable events by the sponsors.
That is correct.
So, again, if Mr. Pistorius goes out and he helps people with his eyesight, because Oakley wanted him to do so, it's because he's obliged to do so. Am I right?
That is indeed correct.
Good. Same with Nike. It's one of his big sponsors, am I correct?
That is indeed correct.
And he is obliged to get involved in the charitable events that they want him to get involved in.
That is correct.
So, if he gets involved and gives a little girl shoes and things that he got from Nike, it's because Nike wants him to do that.
It is not, in this specific case, Nike wanted him to do that. We received from Reach for Dream the opportunity where this little girl wanted equipment to compete. And being a sponsored athlete from Nike, it was just logic for me to approach Nike to see if they would make available out of Mr. Pistorius' allocated budget products that Mr. Pistorius can donate to this specific kid.
Brilliant. That's how I read your letter. So, what happened is, Mr. Pistorius said, Nike, will you give to the little girl? And they did. There's nothing out of it. Mr. Pistorius contributed nothing. Am I right?
If one can interpret it, if it's the case like that Mr. Pistorius did not contribute nothing.
Good. Now, you see, I've gone through, I only had a couple of hours to do this, but I've gone through this document of yours. Now, this deals and mainly with, and it repeats itself, with what he had to do with Mr. Sebastian Coe. Am I right? That was for which?
That's International Inspiration, which was the official charity for the London Olympic Games.
Yes. What he had to do for Mr. Bobby Charlton. What was that?
That is the charity, I can't recall the specific name now, but that is involved with landmine victims and also the eradicating of landmines in different countries.
And again, all those things, we're dealing with well-known sport icons like Sebastian Coe, Bobby Charlton, and they invited Mr. Pistorius to become involved.
That is correct.
Again, if you invite any of your other athletes to become involved, it would not be clever for them not to become involved.
That is correct.
So the fact is that it's merely an advancement of your career to become involved.
If one wants to look at it that way, one can perceive it as that. I think that a lot of sportsmen actually really want to make a difference and contribute.
But as a bonus, as a flip side, it really enhances their careers and their marketability.
Again, one can look at it as that.
Good. Strathclyde. Is that a business opportunity for Mr. Pistorius?
No, that is indeed not a business opportunity. Strathclyde University in Glasgow was already busy developing a foot, and with Mr. Pistorius' foundation, we really saw the synergy by working closely together with them in developing this foot, whereby this can then be supplied to victims all over the world.
Then before I carry on, I'm going to go through your bundle. Do you perceive Mr. Pistorius as a victim in this case?
If you can maybe just allude, sir, in terms of
I'm
what
asking
you mean
you,
by victim?
He's a victim. He's suffering. People are doing this to him.
I'm sorry, I don't follow you at the moment.
Okay. The fact that he does not have the opportunities that he had, who do you blame for that?
If you refer to specifically the opportunities currently that Mr. Pistorius don't have, I don't see Mr. Pistorius as a victim at all.
Okay, let me say. The fact that he's not being invited to address people at huge gatherings, who do you blame for that?
Mr. Pistorius can only be blamed that for himself.
You see, that's what I thought, but that's not what I read. He can only be blamed for himself because he killed someone. Am I right? Why should he be blamed? Because he killed someone and was convicted. Am I right?
That is correct in terms of the court's ruling and judgment.
Now, if you would just open what you have there in front of you at page 108.
Page 108?
Yes. Are you there?
Excuse me, sir?
Sorry, I just want to ensure that the court is ready.
On the same page.
You're there. You sent an email on the 22nd of September to Mr. Weber. Am I right? To Mr. Roo.
That is correct.
And you said, this is a photograph of Oscar addressing an audience on disability awareness.
Indeed.
And what did you then say?
These platforms are now all taken away by the state and media.
So the state and the media have taken away the platform. How did you work that out?
I was specifically referring to a lot of false reporting by the media of the specific incident.
No, but why would false reporting on an incident where an accused shot and killed somebody be to blame and not what he did?
In terms of my view, I think if media reported facts correctly, maybe there would have been some still opportunities for Mr. Pistorius available.
You see, but let us just go back. Remember where we started. I said, who's to blame? You said Mr. Pistorius is to blame because he shot and killed the deceased. Now you blame the media. How do you bring the two together?
As I referred, my lady, I think that if it was handled with a bit more respect in the media, it could have been different for Mr. Pistorius.
So you say if the media said that he fired 4 shots through a door, well knowing that there's somebody in the door, and that he didn't subjectively foresee the possibility that he could kill somebody, but objectively the reasonable man would have, the people would still have invited him to address big platforms after he's killed somebody.
My lady, I can confirm that there are still people out there that have actually wanted Mr. Pistorius to tell his story of motivation and inspiration to the world. and that the legacy that he's left behind are still relevant today.
So people would want to listen to Mr. Pistorius still, after he's killed somebody. Is that what you're saying? And you blame the media?
Lady, yes, I have in fact received still invitations for Mr. Pistorius to do indeed address audiences in terms of sharing his life story and his achievements and hope of inspiration to people.
Why do you blame the state?
That is an error of judgment on my part, and for that I can only apologize.
No, you see, that's not that easy. You wrote it. Am I right? You wrote it.
I wrote
That's what you wrote.
That is indeed correct.
You blame the state and the media for the fact that Mr. Pistorius cannot address audiences on disability awareness. Why do you blame the state for doing their job?
Again, as I said, that was an error of judgment on my part.
Isn't it merely, Mr. Van Zyl, because you don't want to admit that you view Mr. Pistorius as a poor victim of this case?
No, I don't view Mr. Pistorius as a poor victim.
That is the only inference I can make. These platforms are now all taken away by the state and the media. I don't understand that. Why?
As I've said, as far as the state's concerned, that's poor judgment on my part. In terms of the media, I've already elaborated how I perceive it.
Okay, let us, you see, semantics is a strange thing. Poor judgment. Is it poor judgment that you included it? Or is it poor judgment that you used? Should you not have put it in there, but that's what you think? That's a question.
No, that is poor judgment to include the state, and I don't think that.
You don't think that?
Nope.
I'm going to move on, but I find it very strange that you would put something in that you don't even think. That doesn't make sense to me. Do you want to respond or not?
I've already responded.
Did somebody ask you to say that?
No one told me to say that.
Okay. Now, then I'm flabbergasted. Firstly, you don't think it. Nobody asked you to put it in, but it found its way in. How is that possible?
As I said, it was error of poor judgment on my side.
Okay. Mr. Van Zyl, I have to say that the answer of poor judgment in this instance really doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. And I'm going to give you one last opportunity, and then I'm moving on. Is that your answer, and that's the answer you want the court to accept?
That is my answer.
Good. Let us just carry on and go through this bundle of yours. And I cannot deal with everything. If one goes through this in detail, it's quite a lot of documents.
We're still dealing with DDD. DDDD.
It's DDDD. 4 Ds.
Thank you. Yes.
Now, can I ask you, yesterday, and you indicated what you thought the rationale was behind the doctorate that was bestowed on Mr. Pistorius. What was that, as far as you're concerned?
The doctorate that was bestowed on Mr. Pistorius was for the work he's done in conjunction with the University of Strathclyde for developing a specific prosthetic that would have been used by Mr. Pistorius' foundation to supply to victims of landmines and people that has lost limbs that cannot afford or does not have the financial means or medical ability to have prosthesis.
You see, that's what I heard yesterday. But if I look at, I don't want to repeat DDDD, but can I just repeat from now, just refer to the page numbers? We're just referring to DDD.
No, I just wanted to make sure we still, I heard you mention something, I'm not going to repeat what you said.
Page 7 of the bundle you have in front of you.
Yes.
Will that suffice?
Yes.
Have you actually read that?
This is the document that the principal of the university read during the graduate ceremony that was held when Mr. Pistorius received his honorary doctorate.
Exactly. In the end, he said, it's with great pleasure therefore, Principal and Vice Chancellors, that with the authority of the Senate, I ask you to confer upon Oscar Pistorius the degree of Doctor of the University's honoris causa. I'm asking you differently. Have you read this?
I have read this document.
So that is the reason, in this document, why they bestowed the doctorate on him.
As far as I'm concerned, the work that we've done, and when we were approached by the University of Strathclyde, was for the work that Mr. Pistorius has done and we're going to do with them in rolling out his foundation and with this foot that was going to be supplied and given to people and giving people the gift of mobility.
I hear what, as far as you're concerned. I'm dealing with something different, Mr. Van Zyl. You said page 7 and 8 was read out when the doctorate was bestowed. It explains why the university or organization gave him a doctorate. Have you read it?
Yes, I have read this document in 2012 when Mr. Pistorius was bestowed with this honorary doctorate.
In preparation for your evidence, you did not read it again?
No, I did not read it again.
You had this document in your possession and you forwarded it to the defense?
That's correct.
Now, I've read it last night. I had to. There's nothing about the work done. Or let me rather rephrase. Mr. Pistorius has been bestowed a doctorate for what he's achieved from a young age through sport. And that's why this was bestowed on him.
That was part of it, as far as I'm concerned, with the work that we've done on a number of occasions that we did visit university, and we spent a lot of time at the university's lab working with Professor Burney. I think he's also mentioned in one of these documents where him and Mr. Pistorius with his team of students were working on designs, on material composites, on rolling out and production capacities and all that. To my understanding, that was also a huge part of why Mr. Pistorius also received this.
That's what you want to say, but that's not what the document. And that's what we have. We have the document. You handed in this document. You were led on this document. In this document, the speech read out by the person bestowing this paint a different picture. You want the court to think that he was bestowed a doctorate because of his charitable work. It's not so. Would you like us to go through page 7? Let's do that. It starts with a quote about the essence of winning. The will to prepare to win is strong in Oscar Pistorius. He's not only a world-class athlete, but a celebrity of sport when he has become a role model and inspiration for disabled and non-disabled people. A winner whose winnings habit has been powered by dedication, commitment, and unshaken determination. At 11 months old, Oscar's life changed. It gave him a different pathway to most children. At age 17, he broke the 100 meters world record. Oscar's story in athletics has ever been as much. Are you following?
I'm following.
I'm reading the first sentence of each paragraph. We will now all know Oscar is the Blade Runner. He took on a National Association of Athletics who had banned him from the all-able body sport following in 2007. He took them on. There's a famous victory won through persistence. The off-track victory opened the door to London. Competing at London was a historic achievement. For me, the most memorable event of the whole London Olympics involves Kirani James, the eventual winner of the 400 final, and Oscar Pistorius exchanging name tags. In a later interview, James said something. James went on, that's an athlete. Let's turn the page. Crossing over into elite able-bodied events, he helped allow people to see a person differently. Oscar's track success are many since entering, but his place in history is that he opened the door for disabled athletes. His place in history is that he opened the door for disabled athletes to compete on merit in the Olympics and other events. Oscar is a true ambassador for his sport. And so you can go on. There's nothing about anything else. This was bestowed on him.
No, my lady. and so he can go on. Maybe Mr. Nell must. In all fairness, you must read the last 4 paragraphs as well. It's not, and so it can go on. It's very different.
I'll do that. Celebrity is not what is important here. It's more about what celebrity allows someone to achieve. He's an ambassador for Laureate Sports Award. He works with the Mindseeker Foundation. Oscar is also beginning to work with UNICEF as the head of My
lady, with respect, I think we must, if we read something, we can't read it halfway. You can't leave out a major support of charities associated with humanitarian causes. He just skips that. It's unfair.
Mr. Nell, is there a reason why you're skipping that?
No, my lady, just because Mr. Baru is well entitled to a re-examination, follow this up. There's a reason. I just want to get by. I just want to get this in. But, my lady, now that Mr. Roo objected, I already told him, I have no objection to doing that. Please. But, my lady, Mr. Roo knows that he has an opportunity to re-examine, and he should use that.
I understand that, but I'd rather you read the whole thing.
Yes, as a good reader.
Yes.
Let us read. He is an ambassador let's start. While playing extremely well, it may however be some time before he gets to compete in the Open. Now, that was a joke about golf. Correct. Celebrity is not what's important here. It's more about what celebrity allows someone to achieve for the cause of others. Oscar, the athlete and celebrity, is also a major supporter of charities associated with humanitarian causes. Let's see which. He's an ambassador for Laureate Sports for Good, a global charity operating in 34 countries using sport to reach out to change the life of children and youth whose lives are threatened by violence, HIV and lack of education. But we know that there are many sports people involved in the Laureate Sports for Good, am I right?
There's a panel, that's indeed correct.
But there are lots of sports people involved there.
That's what I'm saying. There's a panel of athletes that has been nominated to be on the panel and be a brand ambassador for Laureates.
He works with the Mindseeker Foundation. That's Bobby Charlton's foundation, am I right?
No, that's a different foundation.
Okay, initiative dedicated to detection, identification, and removal of landmines. It's sobering to think that there are 100 million landmines scattered through the most impoverished and war-torn parts of our planet, and every 19 minutes someone is maimed or killed by a landmine. Oscar is also beginning to work with UNICEF, and we expect that the humanitarian work he will undertake will benefit from the passion and determination he has shown on track, and he will be a powerful advocate for those affected. We have that. As the head of biochemical engineering at Strathclyde, we see our mission to provide training and innovation that can better people's lives. With this honorary award to Oscar, we wish to not just recognize Oscar's remarkable past achievements, but his future commitments and drive to help people and children affected by disability. But the point I'm making is, it's not, as you said, it's because of his work with Strathclyde. It's his achievements in the past, focusing on his athletics, and some of the charities he's been involved in. Am I right?
As I've stated earlier, my lady, sport is a platform that allows an athlete a global stage where you can launch your foundations to do good work, and this was why also the association with Strathclyde was formed. In terms of the degree, yes, it was also bestowed on Mr. Pistorius as per this document, but also in my discussions with the professors in the labs, they were also very impressed with Mr. Pistorius' time that he spent and effort he's put in designing and helping with the materials, the composites of the specific food that will enable people globally to benefit from the gift of mobility. And this was all being planned to be rolled out in July of 2013.
We dealt with that. Can you turn to page 13, please?